2%. That is the entire distance between a Formula One team receiving a development token from the governing body and receiving nothing at all. 2% measured by an index that has never been published. Hold that number, because the team that has won every race this season landed on the receiving side of it, and the team that the FIA declared the best engine in the sport landed on the other. Here is what happened, told Flat. On race day at the Monaco Grand Prix, the 5 power unit manufacturers were informed of the FIA's first judgment on the engine pecking order for this season. The assessment was made on telemetry gathered around the Canadian Grand Prix. Sky Sports News later saw the document. Red Bull Powertrains, building their own engine for the first time in the history of the team, were named the benchmark. As the benchmark, they received no development opportunity at all. Mercedes were placed more than 2% behind them, which entitles them to 1 engine upgrade this season and 1 more next year. Ferrari, Audi, and Honda were placed more than 4% behind, which entitles each of them to 2 this season and 2 next. Mercedes-powered cars had taken every pole and every win up to that point. Tell me your country in the comments, because that list keeps surprising me and I do read it. Subscribe while you are down there, because 2 more of these reviews are still to come this year. Now, 6 weeks earlier, in April, Toto Wolff was talking about this exact system before anybody knew where his own team would land in it, and he was not enthusiastic. He objected to the idea of upgrade tokens being handed around loosely and to the mechanism interfering with the competitive order. And then he drew the line that this whole video sits on. The principle of ADWO, he said, was to allow teams that were on the back foot to catch up, but not to leapfrog. Catch up, not leapfrog. His words in April, when he had every reason to believe Mercedes had the strongest package on the grid. In June, Mercedes were handed a token. So let me put the official logic under the light, question by question, because it is more defensible than it first looks. Question 1. What does the index actually measure? The FIA assesses power unit performance at every race using an index built on factors, including input shaft torque, engine speed, MGUK power, and a weighting to account for how sensitive lap time is to power across measured laps. Question 2. Does it measure the whole power unit? No. And this is the detail that explains everything. The indexing focuses on the internal combustion engine, not the complete package, which means a manufacturer can have the best overall unit on the grid and still be judged behind on the specific thing being measured. Question 3. Is the index public? No, it is not available to the media. Nobody outside the process can check the working. Question 4. How precise is the published outcome? Barely at all. The race reported that the information given to teams only divided manufacturers into 2 camps, those at least 2% adrift and those more than 4% adrift. Being in the same camp does not mean being at the same level. Ferrari and Honda are grouped together, and nobody is suggesting those 2 engines are equivalent. Question 5. The one that matters. Did Wolff object when the result landed on his side of the line? Now hold that thought, because he answered that directly, and his answer is the best argument against everything the headline implies. Speaking to Sky Sports F1, Wolff called the upgrade opportunity helpful. He said it is quite easy to measure the amount of power coming from an internal combustion engine, and then he defended the process, in terms that leave him almost no room to retreat later. It is data the FIA measured and collected, he said. There is no political background, there are no favors. It is the outcome of their analysis of their torque sensors and the way it is done, and that is the result. No favors. That is a man who criticized a system in April, and then, when it went his way, publicly vouched for its integrity rather than quietly banking the benefit. Which is either exactly what a straight operator does, or exactly what you would say if you had just been handed something. So follow the chain, because there is a version of this where Wolff never contradicted himself at all. His April objection was about leapfrogging, being allowed to jump ahead. And Mercedes got the smallest allocation on the board. 1 token this year, 1 next. Ferrari, Audi, and Honda each got double that. If the concern was a rival using the system to vault past, then Mercedes receiving the minimum, while 3 competitors received the maximum, is the opposite of the thing he warned about. Read that way, Wolff did not reverse. He objected to a specific risk. That risk did not materialize for him, and the mechanism did roughly what it was designed to do. If you were Wolff in June, you had 2 options and both were awkward. Refuse the token on principle, and you hand your rivals a free run at a gap you could have closed while your board watches. Or take it, having spent April warning about exactly this, and accept that every rival will bring it up for the rest of the season. Which one do you take? Like this video, if you take the token, comment if you refuse it, and I will read the split next time. Subscribe while you are there. Now the comparison that makes this genuinely strange. And it is not Mercedes against Ferrari, it is Red Bull against everybody. Red Bull have entered Formula One as an engine manufacturer for the first time, in partnership with Ford, and their unit was immediately declared the best on the grid. Their reward for that is nothing. No token, no development window, no relief. Meanwhile, Mercedes, whose engines had powered every single win and every single pole up to that point, were classified behind them and given a token. Red Bull did not accept it quietly. They asked the FIA for clarification of the methodology used to reach the conclusion. Max Verstappen said everybody was a little surprised by the news. And Sky Sports News reported that the FIA had not officially confirmed the results, because the governing body was still assessing its findings and holding discussions with all the teams, including the manufacturers. Set the two decisions side by side and both are perfectly coherent on their own terms. The FIA measured the combustion engine and Red Bull's was the strongest, which is a fact about a component. Mercedes were winning everything, which is a fact about a car. Neither of those facts is wrong. They are simply measurements of different things, being used to make one decision. And that is the whole problem, in one sentence. The system rewards or withholds development based on a component, and the sport is judged on results. Now the numbers, because this is what the 2% buys. Hamilton put a figure on the timescale after Monaco. Ferrari have the tokens, he said, but closing that gap is an 8 to 10 month project. It is not something a team does next week. Read that against the calendar and the shape becomes obvious. 2 more ADUO reviews are scheduled this year, one after the Hungarian Grand Prix at the end of July, and one at the Mexico City Grand Prix at the start of November, and those affect next season. Ferrari's second engine upgrade arrives at Monza. Honda's arrives at Zandvoort, and their chief engineer has already said only the combustion side is being touched, because improving energy management is worthless while the engine itself is behind. So the tokens handed out in June are not about this championship. They are about 2027, and the manufacturer that gets its architecture right first will carry that advantage into a rulebook that keeps shifting power back toward the combustion engine. 2% in June on an unpublished index is doing considerably more work than it appears to. There is a structural reason a system like this exists at all, and it deserves saying plainly. Without it, a manufacturer that got the new regulations wrong would be locked out for years, because engines are homologated and cannot simply be reopened. Audi confirmed to Planet F1 that it qualified for an allowance and said this was entirely in line with expectations, that its chassis was delivering and the gap was in the engine, which is unsurprising for a first Formula One power unit. Audi also called ADUO an important tool for leveling the field. That is a manufacturer, on the record, saying the safety net worked exactly as advertised. Whatever else this system is, it is not being smuggled in against the wishes of the people it applies to. Now, the strongest case against the entire framing of this video. There may be no story here at all. Wolff objected to a hypothetical in April, the hypothetical did not occur, and his team received the minimum allocation available. He then publicly defended the integrity of the process that gave it to him, which is not what somebody does when they are quietly pocketing a favor. The measurement is made by torque sensors, not by opinion. And Red Bull, who lost most from the ruling, have not alleged bad faith. They asked for the methodology. That is a manufacturer wanting to understand a calculation, not one crying foul. That is a serious argument, and it may well be the correct one. So here is where I land. Nobody has alleged that this ruling was improper. Not Red Bull, not Ferrari, and certainly not Wolff, who went out of his way to say the opposite. I am not suggesting the FIA measured anything dishonestly, and there is no evidence pointing that way. What I can put in front of you is a decision of real consequence, made on a calculation that nobody outside the room can examine, communicated to the teams in a form so coarse that Ferrari and Honda ended up in the same category. The team that won everything was told it was behind. The team that was told it was ahead won nothing on Sundays. And the man who warned in April that this mechanism must not let anyone leapfrog, then accepted its verdict when the verdict favored him, while calling it free of politics. Every part of that may be entirely innocent. But when a governing body makes a competitive decision using a number, it will not show anyone. The question of who benefits from that opacity is a legitimate one, and it is legitimate regardless of the answer. And 2% is what carries all of it. 2% on an index nobody can see, separating one token from none. Decided at Monaco, applied through to the end of next season. Wolff spent April explaining what this system must never become. Then it produced a result in his favor, and he described it as sensors and data with no politics behind it. He may be entirely right about that. He took it anyway. Zandvoort is next, then Monza on the 4th to the 6th of September, where Ferrari's second token becomes an actual turbocharger on an actual car. And the next Aduo review lands at the Mexico City Grand Prix in November, deciding who develops what in 2027. So predict it now. Does Red Bull stay the benchmark in November, or does that index move once everybody has spent their tokens? Say it below, subscribe so you are here when we check that against the result, and hit like if you want the breakdown the day the numbers land. Until the next one.